welcome everyone. Just letting a few more participants get in to make sure that we're all on board. Also muting anyone that comes in. It should automatically mute, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Now, I'd like to welcome everyone. We have a special guest again tonight, and it looks like whilst there's a few more people just starting to, or still joining in, I'm just going to manage everyone on mute as we've done previously. If you haven't joined us before with this, I'm going to keep you on mute just so that we can manage the session. That doesn't mean you can't participate or ask questions. By all means, do that. There's a couple of ways to do it. There's actually a little chat box if you haven't noticed that already. Thanks, Peter. He's already got a comment in there. And yeah, it's our pleasure to bring you another session tonight. This is a good way for the club members to get together. So once I can see there's no one else waiting, which we're almost there now, got everyone on board. So yeah, if you've got a question throughout the course of the session, if you could type it in, or there's also a function that you can wave. If you don't see that, then just type in your question and we'll get to it later on. After the presentation, there'll probably be an opportunity for you to ask questions directly in any case. So just be a little bit patient. We'll get to those. Anyway, so a good girl. Am I a good girl? Oh, that's good.
Sorry, I've got to go on mute. I've got a puppy that's had surgery, so sorry.
I'll put you on mute if that's okay. Yeah. Okay, I think I've got people on mute now. All right, well, so what I'm going to do, I think we've got just about everyone joined in now. So what I'm going to do is actually pass over to Tim Schreiber, a treasurer, who's going to introduce our guests for tonight. So over to you, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Yeah, welcome everyone, and special welcome to Ray Greenslade, who is with Every Battery. Just let me give you a bit of a thumbnail sketch about Every Battery. The company was established about 11 years ago in COVID-free Tasmania. And I guess the aim back then was to provide a range of quality batteries for every application, I guess hence the name Every Battery. They supply batteries for automotive, marine, a whole range of devices, cameras, mobile phones, laptops. They then support that with a range of charging equipment, and I think reasonably recently they're into solar panels and accessories. Batteries are sourced from both overseas and within Australia, which is good to see. And presently Every Battery operates 10 stores around Australia. And I think, Ray, if I'm correct, you're poised to open another 2 pretty shortly. And I guess in the current environment, online sales are a pretty important part of the business. And I think at the moment accounting for about 25% of revenue. And I think the other point is that all of those 10 stores are all company-owned stores, and Every Battery throughout those stores employs about 37 people. So a pretty sizable operation. So if I can hand over to Ray, the format for the evening is that Ray's going to give us a presentation, and we can either take questions, as Vicky said, via the chat box throughout the presentation, or save them up and you can present them live to Ray at the end. So over to you, Ray. Thank you.
Ray on mute.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Tim. Great. That's a great introductory. Thanks, Tim. Yes, so like every battery, we've set the business up to provide a solution for battery users throughout Australia, and obviously, battery technology has changed a great deal. So, how I'll structure it is, firstly, I'll talk about the different types of batteries for automotive uses, and then we'll move on to how we look after them and how to get the most out of them. Right. So. The first battery that we use regularly is the old lead acid, or commonly known as a wet battery. That's where you have acid and lead plates contained in a battery. That's a traditional type that's been used for, well, really since the dawn of automotive uses. And look, they're still reliable and still used as the basis of car batteries. So, and the features of those, look, they have a long life. The current trend is for them to be maintenance free. So by doing that they've reduced the height of the plates, leaving a large reserve area for extra fluid or acids inside. And they have valves in the top which release the gases but capture the acid inside and drip them back into the actual battery. So that's the first one. Now, the next one is we see more of them, and that's absorbed glass batteries called AGMs. AGMs provide a higher crank power and generally a longer life. Now, these are used in a lot of prestige vehicles, and we're seeing more and more in the stop-start arena of cars. That's cars that when you come to an intersection, they actually shut down and then restart on the movement. That's done for two reasons: better fuel economy and basically to reduce emissions. And the last one, which is really probably the most interesting of all these developments, is the new one, which is like a wet battery, but it's known as an EFB, which means enhanced flooded battery. Now, these were designed specifically for the stop-start cars. Now, this battery is the greatest advancement we've had in batteries for probably about 30 years. And we're using them in a lot of purposes other than the stop-start cars because their ability to recharge very quickly. So normally on their alternators, we can get them to charge in about 15 minutes. So if your car's not used very often, they're the ideal advantage in keeping your battery alive. Now, how they do it is in the row of plates within the envelope, they put a very thick cast negative plate in. So that's what allows the faster recharge. And we're using these in a lot of cars that don't get used very much. So we have a lot of car club members using these, especially for some of the older cars where the alternators aren't as powerful as some of the new ones, so maybe 40 or 50 amp alternators, and they're charging really quickly. So you might find in some of the Mercedes-Benz versions, and look, even some of the Lotuses, where the older ones where they used to use a standard wet lead acid battery, these are a great alternative. And so that's where that's really coming out on car batteries. Now, the value in car batteries, well, we have in our stores, yes, we still have some, just a couple of Chinese ones, and then we moved into the Korean space for our budget batteries about 3 years ago. We made a conscious decision to move from the factories of China, only to get greater availability, and Korea is set up as a country that's making a lot of original equipment batteries. The next step, we support Century, and that's a company that's based out of Queensland, and they make they were original equipment suppliers for Toyota, Ford, and some General Motors models. So it's a pretty interesting thing of what's evolved with Century. They're constantly bringing in new shapes that'll have a wider market spread, and we continue to support. The next one is, of course, the German production with the brands of Bata. Bata's been the original equipment for Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and other makes for a long, long time. It's funny, they're just Ruby's messaged me there about the Greenslade family, where my ancestry comes from near Devon or Exeter, because there's actually a Greenslade bus line. So just thanks for that little note on the side there. All right. Okay, now I'll move just on the first question. I've got one there from Peter. Batteries for cars with a generator, not an alternator. Really simple answer to that. A wet battery, that's a lead acid or an EFB, are fine with generators. In some of the really older Porsches, we've been using the EFB battery in the 356 series. We've been using those with the generators and had great success. So I've answered that one straight off the top there. All right, now moving on to, there's a bit of a fallacy about CCA. That's the cold cranking amp hours of batteries. Now, everyone wants to, or seems to think, that the bigger the CCA, the better the battery. That's actually not true. If we talked about the standard battery that you'd find in the, and we'll just use a reference term, a Toyota Camry, because there seems to be more of those than anything else on the road. The standard spec CCA of that battery is 520 CCA. Now, replacement batteries you might find at 560, 580. That's fine, but some people seem to think that if I put a 650 CCA battery in it, it will last longer. That's actually a fallacy. It won't. If you don't use the car very often, it takes longer to charge. Also, to get the highest CCA, the plates are actually thinner, so it can actually reduce the service life. So ideally, try and keep to near enough to the original factory specification CCA, and that will stand in good stead. I myself, in one of my cars, I've got a 5.7 litre V8. Everyone says to me, "Oh, you must put a 700 CCA battery in it." Well, actually, I've got a 470 CCA, and it starts it perfectly. And that was what Ford specified originally for that car. So it's really important to try and replace at that level, so you get long service life out of your batteries. The next thing is, sometimes we look for up-speccing. Now, we touched on that EFB battery before. There's probably using the car in your club that couldn't benefit from a EFB type. We're even putting them in very late model Ford Mustangs now, and lots of other vehicles that would normally have had a wet. It's just to make it charge faster, and a fully charged battery gives you the best performance. Okay, now the next thing that we really need to look after here is the battery itself. And we have a range of chargers and things like that available for that. Now, obviously, a lot of our cars here are very special to us, and we need to look after them. Now, again, there's been a huge technology advance in battery chargers, and that started with CTEC brand. I think most of you would be familiar with CTECs for released some 10 years ago. That really changed the rules for battery chargers. We still have plenty of other brands out there still selling what we call the ones we used to buy at old McEwen's 25 years ago. All I can suggest to those, cut the cords off and throw them away, because their charging algorithm is pretty tough on the modern battery. And I'll explain how it works. So the old battery chargers used to just throw 10, 15 amps into the battery straight off the cuff. They wouldn't warm them up, so to speak. And what happens with a battery internally is that if you don't use it very much, the acid will go crystalline. It'll go like a bit of a jelly, and that circulates at the bottom of the battery, or just sits there like a mud. With the new battery chargers, they actually warm the battery first to break this crystallization up and get the acid flow around the plates again, and also in doing that remove the sulfation. And that way you start to get a really good charge. So they start off at really less than 1 amp, maybe 0.2, 0.3, and gradually go up through the stage process. So you might have 4, 5, 6, 7 stage charges, even 8. That's exactly what they're doing. They're heating the battery first to get the acid moving and cleaning the battery's internals. That's how you get a better life out of your battery. Look, batteries start to go off with a week of non-use. You probably get 6 weeks out of them before you start to do damage. The other one is when they're in storage, is to try and keep the voltage above 12.6, 12.7. A battery with a higher storage voltage is, again, more resistant to the ravages of the internal sulfation. I always suggest that if you can keep them on what we call a battery maintainer, they're not trickle chargers, they're actually battery maintainers, where they start that program again of warming the battery, then getting the acid circulating. A trickle charger switches on and off with a voltage. That causes evaporation within the battery, and then fluid loss and premature death of the battery, especially if you're using those on what is known as the AGM, the glass mat type, absorbed glass mats. These type of battery chargers will destroy them very quickly. So now, installation of these chargers, this is a really important thing. So for those of you that have got older cars, of course, the old patch lead, permanently connecting it to the positive and negative with a little tail lead, and you can plug in and plug out. Later versions are that you can use the OBD socket. That's the onboard diagnostic socket, which is located under the steering column. We have chargers that plug in via that. So you can actually leave the charger inside the car and close the door and lock it, because the cord is actually flat. So it'll go within the door seals. We're doing a lot of those with the car storage people now, and we use one in particular for this, which I just happened to bring a sample of, is the Noco Genius series. This is your typical car storage charger. It has both the clamps on it, or you can also use the eyelet connectors or that OBD. The benefit of this charger is that it's got two safety features. It has a cord on the connector cord. It has a fuse, and internally there's a overheat protection or a shorting protection circuit. So if the battery collapses while it's on, it automatically shuts off the charger. So we've had I've got one of my clients that's got quite an expensive vehicle and had one of these installed. The battery did collapse and it shut off the charger. He phoned me with great delight and saying that the charger had failed. Well, actually, when I investigated and said there could have been a fire if it hadn't shut down, he was greatly relieved. So it's one of those things that if you have your cars in storage, please invest in a new generation charger. They're a lot safer and they're not that expensive. Like that charger there, I retail for club members for $90. So it's nothing, but what it can save in your batteries, you'll get many years out of it. So there we are with that. So lastly, a battery is the lifeblood of your car. An old tune house owner, a guy by the name of Dave Bennett, who operated Perfect Tune down in Moorabbin for many years, the inventor of the yellow terror head. Asked him at the release of his book at the Shannon's function last year, and I always said to him, look, when I used to take my old GT Falcon down there in the late 70s, it always had a new battery in it after the tune-up. And why was this? And he just said straight off that the car only has one ignition coil. So you need to get the maximum amount of power to it to get the best spark. So what we did was we tested the battery using a carbon pole tester to test its true capacity. And if it was down below 80% of its original spec, I'd just replace it. Well, I can always say when I left that tune house, the car did go really well and continued to stay fresh and crisp for some time. So there was probably a lot of good word in that and good background knowledge. So we see many cars come into us with all sorts of associated problems with them, and it could be that the electric mirrors aren't working properly, or the electric windows aren't working, or some performance issue. What we find is if we replace the battery and reset the car, most of those problems generally disappear. So it's good to note that any modern vehicle will go into a limp home or limp mode very early in the battery deterioration cycle to protect it. So it will start in adverse conditions like really cold mornings. And of course, a lot of them now are designed in Europe or for American market, where if you get caught in your car in the snow, it could be the end of you. So it's an interesting thing to know that batteries are really the critical part of your car. So if you're doing a big tune-up, test your batteries first. And lastly on this, when we test the batteries in our stores, we use those old traditional carbon pile testers. If any of my staff are caught using one of the Tronics or electronic battery testers, look, it's JobKeeper won't really save them. All right, it's really important because the carbon pile tester does expose the true condition of your battery, and where the electronics tend to not see what they call surface charge. Surface charge is where the battery's charged but it hasn't had the full dense charge. So I think probably that's about where I've got a few questions come up already. So I've got Liz there talking about the safety requirements of a LiPo and a LiPo 4. Okay, all right. This is a real tricky one, but I'll be really, really basic on it because I'm not super great because there's so many different types of batteries, but we use the LiPos, the LiPo 4s. In the ones that we use to start cars, it's a very limited range. They have what is called a battery monitoring system within it, and that checks for the drain of the battery, and if the pull or the current draw is too high, it shuts it off. So that then protects the cells and stops them from catching on fire. So if we looked at what you would use in your car, the LiPo 4 is the one to use for automotive starting. You really have to work out, is it worthwhile? Now, for race cars, possibly. That's probably the only place that we can see there's benefit to reduce weight. And the other one is using them as house batteries in boats, more performance engine boats, not for yachts, because sometimes they use the lead acid batteries as part of their ballast. But generally for high performance boats as their house battery. Okay, now I've looked at this one. I've used a 123A LiPo 4 for a few years ago. What's their equivalent? I'm not sure what an A123 is. That's from Ed. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I'm certain I'd probably have a suitable equivalent, because the main thing is to replace whatever we can with LiPos. I've got one there from Ruby saying, okay, so with a modern car with front collision prevention, yes, okay, warning light. If the battery's weak, once the warning lights come on for a weak battery, it's really weak. You may have found other things have gone off beforehand, but look at it. If you're not using the car very often, please charge it first and then bring it in for a test. That's the clear thing. It's very hard to test a battery that's neglected straight up. They need to have a charge if you can achieve a proper clear test. So sometimes we may actually swap the battery in your car with one of our loaners and then put it on a full consolidated 12-hour charge regime and then retest it. But you'll find most cars, once they're starting to give you indicator lights, apart from the charging profile with the alternator light, that they're usually done. One thing we see all the time is battery terminals that are dirty. There seems to be this obsession with that blue or yellow spray to spray in the terminals. That stuff has made me a fortune. So I'd love to pay royalty to whoever it was that invented them. But that blue spray or yellow spray actually reduces the conductivity between the terminal and the post. It's wonderful stuff. All right, so please don't use it. If you want to reduce the corrosion on your battery terminal, there's the old fibrous watches that go under the terminal. If you remember those felt-looking things that are usually green and red, or some are just black. They were actually developed and invented by that company, the Noco company. The old Mr. Noco invented it. It's actually the name Noco means no corrosion, and that's what those watches were for. So we fit many hundreds of those a week of those little watches under the terminal. So that's the best way to keep your battery clean. Okay, now, do modern jump starters damage flat batteries? The answer is no, they don't. Jump starters, like this one here, I've got around the right way. Yeah, Noco Genius. That's a lithium plate battery jump starter. What they do is they actually put some charge into the battery first. So the connection is to connect them to the car, turn the jump starter on, whistle 30 minutes or 30 seconds, I should say, of your favourite tune, and or sing happy birthday to yourself. That's usually enough, and that will transfer some energy into the battery and then start the car. So it's all about the transfer. Now, during that transfer, you'll have your ignition on, so it'll rise your fuel pumps, and that's the main thing, is to get fuel into your injectors. If you've got an old carburetor model, well, look, enough charge in there to get the engine to turn over will operate the fuel pump if it's a mechanical fuel pump. But it's just that normal starting profile. I say to myself, like in Batman did, you know, atomic batteries to power, turbines to speed, and then I fire the ignition. That gives enough time for the fuel pumps to rise, that's the most critical time that you use your battery. Try and give it a chance to get everything up to pressure and whatever else is needed. Okay, I think I've covered that one. What do you think of supercapacitor jump starters? Oh, I love them. They are the greatest thing, especially in marine, as they don't have a spark. Now, I do carry one in stock. It's about $300. And what it'll do is it fires the capacitor up. So if the battery's down to, I think the minimum is 3 volts. So 3 volt is a seriously dead battery. and it's probably let you down plenty of times before by the time it's got the 3 volts. So it'll take power out of what's left out of the battery and put it through the supercapacitor, and then same profile again, wait for the fuel pumps to rise and fire it, and they work really well. Yeah, we've had great success with them. It's just something that's always ready to go. So yeah, it doesn't need to be recharged or have ready charged. It's just one of those things. All right. So I hope I've covered that. I'm looking through the questions. No, I think I've covered all the questions. So really, it's every battery. We've got stores all over Melbourne. Yes, we're trying to open up some more. The COVID's been a bit difficult for us because I'm really chasing another 2 sites in Melbourne. We've already got 2 in Sydney, looking for a 3rd, and we want to launch into Adelaide as quick as possible. It's all about, in this business, it's all about scale. The more stores I have, the better we can offer the service. So, and it gives us scale in purchasing. We already import the Panasonic brand battery out of Japan, and the reason for that was, with all the Japanese-based cars in Australia, we couldn't find an original fit. So Panasonic was the answer for us there. The Vata was for all the European cars, and of course then Century for Australian. And we also have Delcor and many others. Here we go. Next question. Here we go. What about lightweight lithium cars for race cars? Yep. Okay. It's an interesting in race cars where you're trying to pull the weight out. If you've corner weighted your car, sometimes the battery is a key opposite to you as the driver. Otherwise, the lithium battery is fine. We do stock a range of batteries that are suitable for it. In other words, though, they have a different measurement than the traditional CCA. They have what is called pulse cranking amps, and that's for that immediate crank. So it's very hard to find a lithium battery that will really state 550 CCA, but you'll see plenty with say 650, 680 PCA. But just remember, in race cars, it's how you've set the car up. And look, I did do a bit of racing years ago, and the battery was actually part of my balance within the car and on the corner weight. Okay, the next one is about a Touareg. I've been told replacement battery is $600. Okay, Lee, here we go. Okay, the Volkswagen Touareg will no doubt the the battery is located under the passenger seat, front passenger seat. In that model, I would gather it's a glass mat battery or absorbed glass mat, AGM, and the materials in those are the premium, and that car would have been fitted originally with a Vata battery made in Germany. The suggestion is that you replace it with the same. Going down to a cheaper battery, you'll have less reserve capacity, and what we find is that it's just the sheer strength of those AGMs are the answer to this. So we have many that come in that have bought a battery and it's had to be a bit of a rush, or it was the only one available, and we've experienced some issues with a car a few months later where warning lights or some systems not functioning correctly. That's really due to the replacement battery not having the original strength. So all I can say is it came with a Vata. I would suggest you buy a Vata. They're a bit hard to get right now. They're probably about 6 weeks out of stock at the moment. I've got a Korean version that just matches, but still they're all the Korean one's about $525 and the Vata one's about $595. But always remember to have the car recoded. That means that it zero sets the alternator again. So here's an important thing. Okay, with a lot of cars, that the alternator continues to have its output increase to maintain that battery as the battery loses its life. To reset, it's important, especially in some BMW product, because you put the new battery and it will continue to resume at the last setting. So giving the new battery a hiding like it was giving the old one to keep it alive, thus shortening the life of the next battery. Hopefully I've covered that one. Okay, yep, so I've got Hayden there with his Porsche Cayenne. Exactly. Yeah, well, exactly. It is a crazy spot, but all these cars have a similar chassis. Excuse me just for a second. We were talking about the lithium battery before, Porsche and the Cayenne, the Volkswagen, that they use that battery under the passenger seat as part of the balancing for when the driver's in the car. So it forms part of the chassis dynamic. So yes, $800 for the battery. You should have come to see me. No, anyway, we'll always look after you on that. Okay, do we stock full river batteries? This is from Tim. Absolutely. Okay, this is called a AGM deep cycle battery. They're different to a starting battery where these are designed to give a constant voltage output over a longer period of time. Car batteries are designed to give a flash start, so they can produce high amounts of energy for a short period, where deep cycle is longer. And what are used in camper vans and caravans and even solar systems, the deep cycle AGM battery is the choice. Their benefits are that they don't emit a gas during charging or discharging cycle, so they're safe to use indoors. It's really the same as the Turag and the Cane. They use AGM batteries because they are located inside the car, so you don't want to have any charging gases that they smell and quite toxic. Now, so we talk about Full River. Full River is probably the best AGM deep cycle available in the market for caravans. Working out of my Sydney store a month ago, a fellow bought in a 14-year-old camper van, and it still had its original pair of Full Rivers in it. I tested them, and they were still above 80% of capacity, but he was about to embark on a 2-year journey around Australia, so he did change them out. But I was amazed at the quality and how they'd lasted. So today we still sell plenty of Full Rivers, and they're still my battery of choice. Yes, I do import the Pure Energy range, but I have to say that they're still my favourite. Is just the performance that we've seen and the consistent quality of manufacture and the weight. They are quite heavy. 120 amp hour one is about 34, 35 kilos. So it's way above the weight of its competitor, but the reason is it's got more lead in it. Okay. Yes, now, lastly, so, and for four-wheel drive application, yeah, for deep cycle, they're great, but not for under bonnet. Put them at the back inside the cab and charge them with a DC to DC charger. So buy quality DC. There are plenty around. There's Red Arc, there's BM Pro. I stock the BM Pro ones, which are actually made in Melbourne, in where is it? Just in Knoxfield. They're a huge Australian manufacturer. They're standard equipment in JK Caravans and many other brands. A really good product, great support too. Okay, so there we are. I think I've covered everything there. No, I think I've covered everything there. So look, if you want to keep putting notes up there, I'm happy to answer more. I'll just sit here on the side. You're welcome to come to every battery. We do free testing. And once we're over this COVID thing, although if you do need a battery, we are open. You can purchase online through everybattery.com.au or call the store that's nearest you. They are open. You can order your battery, pay for it over the phone, and we can either deliver it. You can pick it up on touch free, or if you need it in store, we can arrange that too. All right. So look, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys. I love doing the car clubs. I'm a car nut myself, and we get to see some fantastic machinery. And the closest I've come to a Lotus, an old Ford Escort some time ago with that Lotus motor in, was a lot of joy, was something to behold, and the old story, which I kept it, but things got to move on. So again, thanks very much, and I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
You gonna talk?
Yeah. Hi, Ray. I'm going to try to unmute everyone. There's been a couple of more questions come through. So if you want to have a look, you might be able to find a few others there that have come through, and I might unmute people so they can ask as well in a few minutes. Okay. All right. I can see this one now for the how much is a LiPo battery for Elise or Essage? Okay, excuse my ignorance, but the Elise had the Toyota 2ZZ motor, I think it was, in it, and I'm familiar with. Is that? There's the 1ZZ, the 2ZZ, the 1ZR, and the 2ZR, and then there's the K series of the older. Yep, the K1. I'm familiar with that. Yep. Yes. Okay. All right. If you're not racing it,
there's very little advantage. Look, we've got small AGM batteries. The Full River starting AGM are very economical, and they're sub $200. They will work really well. But if you're chasing weight, then yes. And look, the start of them for the battery and the lithium is about $450. But it's there's, as I said, look, they're a nice to have, but the performance is not always there in the case. So we look at it. I find that the best place for lithium batteries is in motocross motorcycles, KTMs, and some of the Yamaha products. We have a lot of Harley Davidson cruisers and big Hondas and BMWs. A lot of them have tried the lithiums, but found the correct AGM battery is the better outcome, only because the power delivery of a AGM and the charging cycle is better. We're seeing a lot more cars with AGMs as standard. Like some models of the BMW M3 have a start lithium in it. That's fantastic, but the whole system is designed for it, so it does deliver. So it's a bit of a compromise. You've really got to think about what you're trying to achieve before you spend that money. And look, there's plenty of disappointed people out there. We had a lot of guys try to put them in Skylines, and it just wasn't successful. All right. There now. Do you have batteries for other applications such as home PV? Is that I'm not sure what PV systems are, but yes, I have a huge range. I've got the NBN batteries, I've got alarm batteries, I've got batteries for everything, even for your door remotes, everything. We have a huge range of coin cells. It's very important with coin cells that we try to carry the best brands. We have Panasonic and Renata. Renata is the Swatch watch company. So we try to steer away from some of the other unknown brands purely because they just don't deliver the long life. We buy industrial grade, and look, we try to sell them as cheap as possible. So most coin cells we have are only like $4.95. Okay.
That was my question, Ray. And I guess PV, what I was referring to was solar systems. There's, you know, quite a lot of talk about how good batteries are for those that have got solar panels, and in particular I talk just about every other day to people that are talking about going off grid, and yet I read stuff that sort of says that the batteries are not quite there yet to be able to be reliable.
Okay, good. Look, thanks, Vicky. That's a really good question. Okay, we have quite a few customers in the suburbs that have gone full off the grid. Usually their reason is to either very seriously into environmental issues. The others that they just don't want to pay any more money to a power company. All right, so we've got two types. We have like everyone's talked about the wall type lithium base. There's quite a few brands of those available now, and they're just stacks of what looks like D-sized batteries in racks. That's one kind, and they then work off a charger inverter that runs through the solar panels. We still have a lot of people using AGM type batteries. That's like the Full River. People buying banks of those, and we have varying capacities. A very popular version of those is to buy 6-volt versions with very high amp hours, so 225, 335s. Look, even today we sold a pack of 6 of those, the 235s, for a off-grid situation. Then there's another one called a BAE, and that's a long tubular type battery. Again, same thing with an acid fill. And then people are still using the old-fashioned deep cycle as well, the standard old lead plate. It's whereabouts you're going to store the battery, where the fumes are going to go if they're going to emit a fume, and what you really need to run off it. So we've supplied solar panels and chargers for many country shed situations where they've got panels on top of a shed, and then they put their caravan or whatever inside. We're also a big supplier to aquaculture business down in Tasmania, where we sold large quantities of solar panels and batteries and charging sets for those as well. We don't get into the home installation market because it's really driven by government grant and all sorts of incentives and that. And that's not our main business. But for hobby farm or hobby situations, power sheds in remote areas, we do lots and lots of those. We have a brand called Victron Energy. Victron Energy is probably the leading brand in inverters and chargers for that business. We have all the cables, everything else. We're also quite large in solar panels for caravans because most people would like to or have to be off the grid with those, and many locations will no longer allow generators to be on site. I changed my camper van several years ago, threw the generator out and went 100% battery. Best thing I ever did, and I've never run out of power, even with a few mates with really big fridges and radios going and TVs. So the best thing is just to match what your power requirement is to what is needed, and once you've done your research, it's always a good outcome.
Thanks, Ray. I was just about to write it to everyone, but I am about to unmute you all so that there is actually one question there that you might want to go on with. But just before you answer that, I'm going to let everyone know I'm going to unmute you. But can you just be mindful, just in case you've got some background noise. But, you know, if you do have some other questions, you're very welcome in a moment to ask them directly to Ray. So go ahead, Ray.
Okay, I'm ready. Questions?
There's one here about what is the weight difference between AGM and LifePO for the racetrack application?
Like they're about they're about half the weight. So look, if we put together the best comparison is a 100 amp hour deep cycle AGM battery will weigh an average of 30 kilo. A lithium of the same performance or the same node capacity is about 14 to 15 kilo, but the run time on the lithium is nearly double again. So you took it that way, they're about 25% of the weight. All right, but again, they're pulse cranking amps in a race car with a lithium, and it's all the other accessories it's got to run. So fuel pumps, whatever else is on the car, all come into it. So it's funny, if you look at a V8 supercar, half the crowd run AGMs and the other half run lithiums. It was just how they set their suspension. A battery for something like that we sell for about $13.50, and it comes with its own special proprietary charger. It doesn't need any alternator modification. But that's pretty serious race cars. If you're just a clubby racer, the other style, the AGM, is still really effective. I'll answer that.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Lee's chimed in to say that his SSB lithium weighs 1.75 kilos.
Okay, yep, I can answer. Okay, the SSB one. Look, SSBs are basically what can I say? The basic of the lithium battery. We still sell some SSBs, but we have another brand called SPB, Powersonic. We find that the BMS is the best and more friendly to most alternators. So yes, 1.75 kilos. Yep, that's probably a little, but that's probably all you need. So yep, I can see here. Yeah, okay. So a 2 kilo lithium battery is fine. That's starting to move up. That's probably got the 625 PSA to fire your car over. Absolutely. Yeah, look, it's not that I'm against them. It's just if you're really serious in going lithium in your car, that's good. But just make sure you buy the right battery. All right. It's not all lithiums are created equally, and the good ones do cost some money. All right. And you need to make sure that your charger is the correct type, because lithium batteries need a straight voltage charger, not a reprocessing or a variable rate. Okay.
That's a good point. That might have raised a few questions. Last call then for questions. Anyone else got one? And you can speak up, just try to do it one at a time if that's okay. Anyone else got a question?
Okay.
I think I must have confused you all.
No, look, it was,
stores in Melbourne.
Sorry, I couldn't. Stores in Melbourne. Yeah, I've got one at High Street, Ashburton, Bell Street, Heidelberg, Gatehouse Drive, Kensington, and Bond Street in Ringwood.
Okay, thanks. Ringwood's closest. Cheers.
61, yeah, 61 Bond Street. Costco's at one end with Eastland, and we're down the other end.
No worries, thanks.
Pleasure.
Knows his stuff, doesn't he?
okay, Ray. Well, then I would really like to thank you very much for that, because clearly you know batteries. That's definitely your profession, and it's great that you've got some independence as well, and so much advice. So I'm sure that everyone has learnt a little bit, and from the questions, I'm sure appreciates your advice as well. So thank you very much, Ray.
It's a pleasure, absolutely, Vicky. It was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Hopefully see you in the shop sometime. And it's always great to speak to car clubs, because we've all got that hidden passion, haven't we? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And to all the members, I hope you're all well and looking out for each other. It is a difficult time, I know. We will continue to bring you monthly club meetings this way, so look out for emails. We do have a special guest from the UK planned for, or actually that's not next month, sorry, I'm getting confused. It's coming up in a couple of months. So yeah, we've certainly got a few things organised, and so look forward to seeing you guys again next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Signing
Bye.
out now.
Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.